Well, I'm now joined by one of the authors' reports, Christopher Smallwood. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, first of all, can you set out your case, if you like, for why it would be good for the smaller countries?
Sure. Well, it's not just the smaller countries. If you look at the growth record of the Eurozone over the 10 years of its existence, it has been absolutely dismal. So the Eurozone has grown by 1% a year in the last 10 years only. Germany's grown by 0.5%, and Italy hasn't grown at all. So it's an extremely bad record.
And going forward, if the euro remains, you don't think that growth is actually going to be increased?
No, because I think the existence of the Eurozone has contributed very greatly to this growth performance. And there are two essential problems. One is that nobody can keep up with Germany inside this fixed exchange rate system. Germany is so efficient, it's undermining the productive capacity of the other countries. And secondly, of course, Germany endlessly deflates, it's endlessly cutting its budget deficits, which means that the only way for the weak countries to get out of their problems is to deflate even more. So the whole system pushes the countries down, and that's a major reason why their growth performance has been so bad. So that's why we're saying, if you could just break up this sort of corset that's holding the whole thing in, we'd have more growth all round. Everybody would be better off.
So if you take a country like Ireland, for example, I mean, there are a number of economists, obviously, who've been saying this, particularly in those countries. If they were to pull out of the Eurozone tomorrow, their economy would effectively devalue. And therefore they would be an awful lot more competitive.
Absolutely right.
Those kind of countries would be able to also potentially go to some of the creditors and say, OK, right, let's do a deal, essentially.
Absolutely right. But just the same for Greece, just the same for Portugal. If they are only cutting their budget deficits, then they can only shrink. But if they can cut their budget deficits and devalue at the same time, then they can start getting some growth.
Can I ask it sounds like a very basic question, but why does this seem so out there? Why aren't they already doing this, or certainly thinking about it an awful lot more than that? You know, it almost seems like this is a bit pie in the sky. It's never really going to happen. Why isn't it being taken more seriously? Well,
I think mainly because of the amount of political capital that's been invested in the Eurozone. It's basically a political thing. But there was a survey recently by the Economist Intelligence Unit of bank chief executives and chairmen. And the great majority of those, more than 50%, thought that a number of countries would leave the euro in the next 2 or 3 years. It's not a bizarre idea. It has to be carefully managed. But it's becoming increasingly likely.
Now, what about Germany? I mean, Germany seems to be doing really well at the moment. You know, exports are surging ahead, and those big companies like Siemens, BMW, they're having a great time with the lower euro. Now that the euro is rising back up from those real lows that we saw around 118 to the US dollar, is that still the case? I mean, is it still great news for Germany?
If the euro gets stronger? Well, I mean, that's obviously going to slow down their export growth to some degree. But it's such an exporting machine. They're going to continue to have very big trade surpluses for years to come. And the point is that those surpluses correspond to big deficits of the weak countries in the Eurozone, and that's what is an important factor that's holding them back. And so would a breakup of the Eurozone end up being good news for Germany if I mean, presumably the Deutschmark would rise and be a much stronger
currency?
It would be very good news for Germany. The Deutschmark would rise a lot. It would cut the price of their imports. The German government would have no choice but to have expansionary policies then, and that big trade surplus would be translated across to benefits for German households. Everybody in Germany would be better off.
Can you see it really happening?
I can see a number of small countries leaving because of the pressures on them, the rising unemployment and so on that they're facing. I can see Greece, Portugal leaving, certainly. And once that process starts, we don't know where it's going to finish.
Christopher Smallwood, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.